Morant with a running start. Elevate! Oh, it dunks! Oh, my goodness!
Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn. His heat is gone! Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining. Conley now with three. Count it! A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance.
Adams going long. Morant! He hit it! John Morant! Insanity!
You gotta be kidding me.
Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. My name is Keith Parrish. The Grizzlies endured back-to-back heartbreaking last-second losses over the weekend on Friday night in a showcase game against the New York Knicks. There were multiple lead changes in the final seconds, but it was the Knicks behind an OG Anunoby three-pointer coming out on top. Then, on the second night of a back-to-back, the Grizzlies lost while playing shorthanded to the San Antonio Spurs. This time it was De'Aaron Fox hitting the clutch shot, and the Grizzlies lose 2 straight games at home. They lose 2 straight thrilling, close games, and now find themselves 4th in the Western Conference standings. So on today's show, I'm going to talk about both of those games. Before I do, just a reminder, if you want to support this program, do that at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. If you sign up over there, you get access to the bonus episode that I released yesterday on Sunday, where I answered listener questions. I went over the best players that I would trade for Cooper Flagg. I went over some other fun stuff. So if you want access to that show, that's at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. Also, if you sign up, you can join the listener Slack channel, patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. All right, let's start with the Knicks game. The Knicks game was a fully healthy Grizzlies team. It was a chance for a measure of revenge after being absolutely dominated by the Knicks in the game in New York. It was another chance to match up with one of the NBA's best teams and to say, how do we stand when we compare ourselves to these really good teams? Well, for most of the game, the Grizzlies did a really good job. The Grizzlies led for most of the game. I think you can be encouraged by it. The big story statistically from the game is the Grizzlies could not make any three-pointers. And throughout the game, it was like, man, we're not hitting our threes, but we're still winning. We're up by 10. The Grizzlies had a 12-point lead in the third quarter. Now, going into the fourth quarter, there was a slight bit of controversy. Ja Morant was called for a technical foul at the end of the third quarter. Several seconds after the third quarter buzzer, the Knicks have shot the basketball. The ball ends up in Ja Morant's hands. He throws the ball the length of the court. This is called a technical foul. You're not allowed to throw the ball the length of the court. The ball goes into the stands. Now, Ja Morant and Grizzlies fans would argue he was just launching the ball towards the basket. That's kind of how I felt like the situation went down, but of course I'm a biased Grizzlies fan. I just thought Ja Morant was throwing the ball, trying to make a full court shot, even if it was after the buzzer. I'm in favor of this. It's an entertainment league. That's an entertainment play. Now, if you want to argue Ja Morant was not attempting an actual shot towards the basket, I think you'd point to the fact that Ja Morant was not facing the basket. But you don't need to face the basket to throw a heave. You know where the basket is. But anyways, this is called a technical foul. Throwing the ball the length of the court is one of those, you'd call it a black and white referee decision. That is by rule a technical foul. Unless, of course, you figured it was a shot attempt. Now, actually, there was a pool report after the game where the referees were asked why Ja Morant was assessed a technical foul, and they said that it's because he threw the ball the length of the floor, and they spelled out if they thought it was a legitimate shot attempt, there's no rule against calling a technical foul. But regardless, this ends up being, you could argue, the margin in the game. OG Anunoby makes a free throw to start the fourth quarter. Grizzlies lose the game by 1. Also, since then, Ja Morant got fined $25,000 for throwing the ball into the stands. So, again, the league feels like it's pretty cut and dried. This was a technical foul. I'll say as a viewer, I haven't seen multiple angles of this situation. I only saw the one TV broadcast and the ball leaves the screen. I don't know how close it got towards the basket. I don't even know if Ja Morant was truly trying to make a shot. But certainly I've spent too much time talking about it. But regardless, that made it a 5-point Grizzlies lead after OG hits that technical free throw. Then in the fourth quarter, it doesn't take 2 minutes for the lead to completely evaporate. The Knicks take the lead. Then Jaren puts together, I think, 6 points. The Grizzlies go on an 8-1 run where Jaren has 6 of those points to take the lead back from the Knicks. And they're ahead with 6 minutes and 44 seconds left. And the final 6 minutes and 44 seconds of the fourth quarter, much like a lot of the game, it felt like a playoff game. Both teams did not shoot the basketball very, very well. It was tight. The Grizzlies struggled to score. The Grizzlies only scored 9 points over the final 6 minutes and 44 seconds. Despite that, we still got a thrilling final minute. We had numerous clutch plays. Ja Morant came up big in this game. Ja Morant, after a 8-second violation and a Jalen Brunson 3, maybe we should talk about that right now. The Grizzlies were up by 2. Jaren gets a rebound, and he's having his momentum carry him out of bounds. He throws it back in bounds, and that's the change of possession. The shot clock starts at that point. And the Grizzlies very quickly, it's apparent they're having trouble getting the ball across half court. I think everyone watching this felt like somebody needs to call a timeout. There's 35 seconds left. The Grizzlies had both of their timeouts left. They had the ball. They were winning by 2. Why isn't anyone calling a timeout? Now, any player could have called a timeout. We point to Taylor Jenkins and the coaching staff. Why isn't Taylor Jenkins calling a timeout? He did not. Watch the replay. Taylor Jenkins did not attempt to call a timeout until the 8-second violation had already happened. I had a friend at the game telling me that everyone was screaming for a timeout. This friend told me that Ja Morant himself yelled for a timeout. You can't see it on the replay. An 8-second violation, and the Knicks get the ball right back. At the very least, I think after Jaren saves it, a couple of seconds elapse, but with 20 seconds, 19 seconds, 18 seconds on the shot clock, you got to call timeout there. The Grizzlies do not. It's an unfortunate turnover. Then on the next possession, Jalen Brunson hits an easy three-pointer. They go at Zach Edey. They get Zach Edey involved in a 2-man game, a little pick and roll. Zach's play and drop, a very easy three-pointer for Jalen Brunson. That gives the Knicks the lead. But then Ja Morant comes down on the offensive end, hits a huge clutch bucket, gets fouled, puts the Grizzlies back up 2. We're writing our game stories right here. Ja Morant comes through in the clutch once again. And Ja Morant, for his entire career, tremendous clutch shooting numbers. I think now he's something like 9 for 21 on field goal attempts to either take the lead or tie the game in the final 15 seconds of the basketball game. And you could say that's under 500. That's incredible. Those numbers are incredible. LeBron shoots 10% in these situations. Being close to 50% in these situations is incredible. So Ja makes this big clutch basket. Then the next Knicks possession where OG hits the go-ahead three-pointer, the game-winning three-pointer, there are certainly questions to be asked about how the Grizzlies defended this play. The initial reaction, I think we all thought, why is Santi Aldama helping off of a three-point shooter? You have a 2-point lead. Worst case scenario is allowing an open three-pointer. If the Knicks tie it on a 2-pointer, you get the ball. You have a chance to win the game at the end of regulation. Now, when you watch the replay, you kind of see how the defense got all out of whack because Vince Williams Jr. comes over to try to double team the basketball, but Jalen Brunson moves too quickly for Vince to be effective. Thus, it sets up essentially a 3-on-1 for the Knicks going towards the basket. I think it makes sense for Santi to help in. Like, yeah, a 2-pointer doesn't kill you, but it really, really hurts you. It ties the game up for the Knicks, so I understand Santi helping in a little bit there. I don't know if he was told to, no matter what, stick on the shooter. In the postgame, Taylor Jenkins actually took the blame. He volunteered the fact that he told Vince Williams Jr. to go double-team Jalen Brunson. They wanted to get the ball out of Jalen Brunson's hands. They didn't want clutch Jalen Brunson to beat them. Jalen Brunson, by the way, after beating the Grizzlies, ended up with numerous clutch shots and was the hero against the Miami Heat. Jalen Brunson might win Clutch Player of the Year. Also, similar situation unfolded in the second game of the back-to-back for the Grizzlies against the Spurs. De'Aaron Fox, he ends up going one-on-one against Jalen Wells. They do sort of try to double-team him a little bit. Santi Aldama kind of runs over to try to help, but it's too late. De'Aaron Fox slams on the brakes, pulls up for the game-winning 20-footer. But in the end of the Knicks game, it felt like a defensive mistake, whatever happened. And I think you compound that with the 8-second violation, not calling a timeout there. And it does not look like a brilliant coaching moment for the Grizzlies. But all those things occur. The Grizzlies do get a chance to win the game. I thought the shot was going in from Ja Morant. This is a shot he's made many times for game winners. It's a shot he's even missed before for game winners, this difficult left-handed layup, but I thought it was going to go in. Aldama had a chance to tap it in. It did not go in, of course, and the Grizzlies lose by 1. And I think when you look at the fact that the Grizzlies, despite those errors, and then you look at the shooting numbers, the Grizzlies did not make a three-pointer in the second half. So while it's frustrating to once again lose to a good team, I came away from this game feeling like, okay, we were in it, and we didn't make a three-pointer in the second half. We made a season-low 4 3-pointers. The Grizzlies shot a season-low 3-point percentage in the game. I felt vaguely encouraged about that game. Now, the second out of the back-to-back, not encouraged. Now, of course, the big issue with this game was you were extremely short-handed. There was no Ja Morant against the Spurs, no Desmond Bane, no Vince Williams Jr., no Brandon Clark. Also, of course, for the Knicks game, Brandon Clark got knocked out of that game, took an elbow to the mouth, had to get stitches, missed the end of the game. If Brandon is healthy, he's the one guarding that final Knicks 2-man possession. I think with our closer in there, it might have gone differently. I also think the end of the Spurs game might have gone differently if Brandon Clark is available. And Zach Edey had, I think you would argue, good games. Or you could, I think, justifiably say Zach Edey played well against the Knicks and against the Spurs. But for those specific defensive situations, you kind of wish you had Brandon Clark available. But the second out of the back-to-back, Brandon missed the game. Ja Morant missed the game. Now, it's not surprising that Ja Morant missed the second game of a back-to-back. It's more important for the Grizzlies to have Ja Morant healthy for the playoffs. It's more important for their entire squad to have guys healthy for the playoffs. But it was, at the very least, amusing / very surprising how we found out that Ja Morant was not going to be available. On the initial injury report that came out on Saturday for the Spurs game, I was very surprised that Ja Morant was not listed. Notably, Ja Morant has not played 6 straight games since the Shotgun Willies incident, since the 2022-2023 season. That's the last time Ja Morant played more than 5 games in a row. Now, he's played 5 games in a row a couple times this year. The game against the Spurs was his first chance to play 6 games in a row in over 2 years. And I'm thinking, wow, I did not think he would play the second out of the back-to-back, but maybe because they lost, they're like, listen, Ja's going to play. But then, lo and behold, later in the day, there was an update. Ja Morant is questionable for the Spurs game. Oh, what a twist. So I thought that was funny. And then, of course, Ja Morant misses the game. Desmond Bane also misses the game with soreness. The NBA.com write-up somewhat comically says Ja Morant and Desmond Bane missed the game with sorenesses. Yeah, so those guys weren't available. You're very shorthanded. And the Grizzlies, while being shorthanded, started a really strange lineup. The Grizzlies starters, who I would not have guessed correctly if you gave me many tries before the game, the Grizzlies started Scottie Pippen Jr., John Conchar, Jalen Wells, Santi Aldama, and Jaren Jackson Jr. Now, most of the time, I feel like I can pretty easily see the thought process that goes into the players who start or the players who even sub in or what they were thinking with the rotation. There's sometimes I can't figure it out. Like in the Knicks game, for example, the team was totally healthy. So you would think surely they left one of Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, or Jaren Jackson Jr. on the court at all times. No, they had, I think, something like 4 minutes or so where all three of those guys were on the bench. Were the Grizzlies significantly outscored in those 4 minutes? Yes, they were. The Knicks won those 4 minutes by 8 points. You lose the game by 1. But for the starting lineup in the Spurs game, I was confused. I think I figured it out, though. I thought through it for a while. I think with no Ja Morant and no Desmond Bane, of course, those are your regular starters. Those are two of your best players. Those are veteran, all-star level players. I think they knew they were going to have to start someone younger and less experienced, and they did not necessarily want to start Zach Edey, Jalen Wells, and someone like Scottie Pippen Jr. Now, they could have stuck with their typical starters of Zach Edey, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Jalen Wells, and then brought in Luke Kennard, who the Grizzlies have had very good success with him starting this year. I think they could have done that, and then also played big and had Santi Aldama. I think the reason Santi Aldama started, that's not confusing. Without Desmond Bane and Ja Morant, you want Santi in there because, frankly, Santi's been your fourth best player this year. So that makes sense. So you would say, okay, let's go big. We'll start Edey and Jaren and Santi Aldama. I understand why they did not do that because there's no Brandon Clark. Now your bench, there aren't any bigs. There's Jay Huff. There's Marvin Bagley, who you haven't really used this year. So I think they thought we have to start Santi Aldama, first of all, because that's our fourth best player. That might be our second best available player against the Spurs. So Santi is starting. Because of that, let's move Edey to the bench. Now, why didn't Luke Kennard start? Not totally sure. But I think perhaps, my guess is, they figured, okay, Luke starting with Desmond Bane, that makes sense. That's enough ball handlers where between those guys, they'll be okay. I think maybe with both Ja and Desmond out, they were like, I don't think we can cover the ball handling with just Luke Kennard. Like a Luke, Jalen, Santi, whoever, Jaren, Edey, or Jaren and, I don't know, Conchar like they did. You're like, that's not enough ball handling. We needed a traditional point guard in Scottie Pippen Jr., and so we'll do that. Now, how did John Conchar end up starting? Well, I guess next best available player who kind of fits in with everybody. I mean, you think about who they could have started. I guess they could have started G.G. Jackson. By the way, G.G. Jackson did not play in the Knicks game. He was questionable with a abrasion to his eye. I think he could have gone if they wanted him to play. I think if G.G. Jackson had been available against the Knicks, he was going to get a DMP. He was not going to be part of the bench. I think they were going to play Scottie Pippen Jr. over him. Now, against the Spurs, you'd think, hey, we're missing a lot of guys. Vince Williams Jr. can't play the second out of a back-to-back. This is Gigi's time to get back in the good graces, to get some minutes and go off against a not very good Spurs team. No, Gigi did not get extra minutes. More on that in a second. But I guess you go with Conchar because you did not trust G.G. Jackson. I still feel like maybe you would have wanted to start Luke Kennard. Maybe they're like, Luke Kennard's going to be our point guard for the second unit. We're not comfortable staggering Scotty and Luke if they both start at the same time. For whatever reason, John Conchar started this basketball game, which was surprising. And I like John Conchar. Fine basketball player. But you started two guys in John Conchar and Scottie Pippen Jr. who, have gotten DMPs. Both of them have gotten DMPs when the team is mostly healthy. So that part was surprising. I feel like Luke probably should have started. But honestly, the starting lineup doesn't matter that much. The starting lineup played fine together. John Conchar, he missed all of his three-pointers. He played fine. The issue was your bench was awful. And the bench was awful, and then the starters did not defend, and that combination meant you lost this game in the first half. You lost this game in the second quarter because you were so depleted with no John Morant, no Desmond Bane, no Vince Williams Jr., no Brandon Clark. Jay Huff got back in the game for the first time in a while, so he was dusted off. Cam Spencer played significant minutes. Those guys got lit on fire. I understand the thought process, I think, that went into this. You're shorthanded. You trust those guys. You trust your bench. That's what the Grizzlies do. The Grizzlies play their starters the fewest minutes of any team in the NBA. They hoped that with Jaren Jackson Jr. out there, he could anchor a second unit that has some guys who haven't played in a while. So you had Jaren out there with Scottie Pippen Jr. and then Gigi Jackson, Jay Huff, and Cam Spencer. And you got outscored 17-2 in just a few minutes. Then they're like, all right, we can't play Jay Huff. Maybe we can't even play Cam Spencer. Guess what? Lamar Stevens, you're the 11th guy in. Is it weird they played 11 players in a game where you were missing 4 of your top 8 or 9 guys? It's only weird if you're not the Grizzlies. But the Grizzlies got destroyed in that second quarter. They let the Spurs score a season-high 77 points and a half. The Grizzlies trailed by 22. At one point, it was 77 to 58 at halftime. And just the defense has not been good enough. Now, in the second half, you commend the Grizzlies for coming back. Jaren Jackson Jr. scored 31 points in the second half. He finished this game with 42 points. Incredible Jaren Jackson Jr. game. They got all the way back. They had a 9-0 run in the fourth to tie it at 125. Then, after De'Aaron Fox gets fouled on a three-pointer and makes all 3 of his free throws, Jaren Jackson Jr. hits a step-back, banked-in three-pointer to tie the game. Let's go. Also, the Grizzlies have this history the last couple of years of rallying from huge deficits against the Spurs. Also, by the way, as you know, we've dominated the Spurs. The Grizzlies had won 16 of their last 17 against the Spurs. The only loss was last year when they had 7 players and they were tanking. I thought maybe Lamar Stevens played in both of the Grizzlies' last 2 losses to the Spurs because, of course, Lamar Stevens back on the team. Sporting a new number, by the way. Of course, last year, Lamar Stevens was wearing number 24, Dylan Brooks' old jersey. Cam Spencer is the new 24 this year, so now Lamar had to pick a new number. He went with number 8. The number 8 jersey I associate with James Ennis. Anyways, Lamar was not to blame for last year's loss. Wasn't to blame for this year's loss. He played hard, played well. But Lamar did not dress in last year's tanking game to the Spurs. But anyways, the Grizzlies have a tie game, 128 after Jaren makes this clutch three-pointer. But then, of course, the final play unfolded. De'Aaron Fox hits the game winner. And the big issue, couple of issues. Your depth isn't that good right now. We can talk about that and maybe the decisions they made at the trade deadline. Also, the Grizzlies' defense is really struggling. Over the last 15 games, which is an arbitrary number, it's just what the NBA stats page lists as the easiest drop down, for if you want to go back. 15 games is the furthest it goes back without having to go in and customize the dates. In the last 15 games, the Grizzlies are 21st in defensive rating. Not great. The Grizzlies have fallen to 10th in defensive rating for the season. If you want to go since the trade deadline, when you arguably harmed your depth, in the 9 games since the trade deadline, where of course the Grizzlies are 3-6, you beat the Magic in a somewhat miraculous comeback. Beat the Magic by 1, I think. You erased a 19-point lead in that game. You beat the Suns twice. One of those Suns games, you rallied from 4 down in the final, was it 30 seconds? Final minute of regulation. You beat them 152 to 148 in overtime. The rest of the games, they've been close losses. I mean, all these games have been close. The Grizzlies have had a single possession game the last 5 games. The Cavs game, you got within 3, but the Cavs still had the ball. The other games, you've either been tied or had the lead in the final 30 seconds, but you lost them. So since the trade deadline, the Grizzlies are 3-6. Their defensive rating, 27th in the NBA in those 9 games. Now, 9 games is a very small sample size. There are ebbs and flows to the season, but right now it's the Grizzlies' defense that is not helping them. And also, I think it's fair to criticize once again, I think it is at least, the decision to stand pat at the trade deadline. I don't feel like this is a short-sighted or a hindsight is 2020 approach to look at the close losses to pretty good teams. I mean, Pacers are a good team. You lost to the Thunder after the trade deadline. They're fantastic. You also have the Cavaliers. Cavaliers are maybe the best team in the league. You lost to the Knicks. It's one of the best teams in the league. You played these teams closely, but you didn't come out on top, and you haven't come out on top throughout the season when playing the best teams. And now you lose to the Spurs team on the second night of a back-to-back because you're so shorthanded. Because Ja Morant can't play back-to-backs that frequently. Because Brandon Clark has injury concerns. Because Vince Williams Jr. has injury concerns. And, oh, by the way, you don't trust G.G. Jackson. Let's get into that and some more thoughts on the Grizzlies standing pat at the trade deadline right after this short break. Okay, so losing close games, it happens in the NBA. These games are a toss-up a lot of the time. You win some, you lose some. And none of the Grizzlies' losses since the trade deadline would you say is a really bad loss. I mean, losing to the Spurs, not ideal. The Spurs, of course, don't have Victor Wembanyama. They'd lost 4 straight games coming into this one, but you're playing on the second night of a back-to-back. That's a tough game. But it's exceptionally tough, or it is more difficult because of the limitations you have placed on yourself, which happen to be getting rid of useful players at the NBA trade deadline. The argument for this was prioritizing the chance to increase your odds of making sure Jaren Jackson Jr. does not walk in free agency. Another argument that was thrown out there for why the Grizzlies did this, got out ahead of it, getting rid of Marcus Smart's contract a year early, was because you're freeing up playing time for G.G. Jackson and Vince Williams Jr. Whoops. G.G. Jackson lost his minutes against the Spurs to Lamar Stevens on a 10-day and a rookie Cam Spencer. I don't think we knew as a fan base when the Grizzlies salary dumped Marcus Smart and got rid of Jake LaRavia that G.G. Jackson was on such a short leash. If you're not going to play G.G. Jackson, and if Vince Williams Jr. is physically unable to play back-to-backs, or if Vince Williams Jr. is still a liability health-wise for the playoffs, the decisions to get rid of Jake LaRavia and Marcus Smart, it just looks even worse. Also, you look at a team like Cleveland. Cleveland traded Karis LeVert, Georges Niang, and 3 second-round picks for DeAndre Hunter. They haven't lost since they did that. They're 9-0 since the trade deadline. They traded Karis LeVert and 3 seconds for DeAndre Hunter. The Grizzlies could have seemingly traded for DeAndre Hunter. The Cavs sent 3 second-round picks, Karis LeVert, Georges Niang for DeAndre Hunter. The Grizzlies sent Marcus Smart, Jake LaRavia, and a first-round pick for Marvin Bagley. Also a couple second-round picks. Does not look very good. You could have gotten a player, I think, that would have helped you. I think DeAndre Hunter I mean, he could play above Jalen Wells. He'd play alongside Jalen Wells. He could be a sixth man, a starter. I don't care. He's a wing player who was available, whose salary matched Marcus Smart's salary. Does not look very good. And again, this is not hindsight is 2020. These are things I was really upset about at the trade deadline. But maybe it's not going to matter. Of course, if the team's healthy in the playoffs, that's all that matters. And losing a regular season game, not that big of a deal. There are no back-to-backs in the playoffs. Hopefully Vince Williams Jr. will be healthy then. Vince had an okay game against the Knicks, 7 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists. He did get blown by a fair amount, it seemed like. He played his full 20 minutes in that one. That was good to see. But if they don't have this faith in Gigi Jackson, and maybe you could say Zach Kleiman has more faith in Gigi Jackson than Taylor Jenkins. Taylor Jenkins is not playing him. Taylor Jenkins is the one not playing Gigi Jackson. But if you don't have faith in Gigi Jackson, and Vince Williams Jr. can't go, and you already know you have injury concerns with John Morant and Brandon Clark, not having a Marcus Smart around, who, by the way, has been sort of throwing shots at the Grizzlies. Marcus Smart, in a walk-off interview after a Wizards win, was like, let people know that I can still play. People thought I couldn't play anymore. Seems like a veiled shot at the Grizzlies, certainly. Maybe it was a veiled shot at me for criticizing him when he was on the Grizzlies. But I think getting rid of Marcus Smart, who would have been extremely helpful in a lot of these games, especially games where Desmond Bane and John Morant both miss, where you're starting John Conchar and Cam Spencer's playing minutes. It's hard not to say they tripled down on youth once again. It's what they did, and we really feel it in these games. And now maybe the Grizzlies bounce back against the Hawks on Monday night. They win some more games. And like I said, the Spurs loss doesn't really matter that much. Losing in a close game to these good teams doesn't matter that much, except for the fact you're fourth in the West now. Right now, the Nuggets and Lakers have passed you. You're only a game ahead of the Rockets for fifth place. The Grizzlies, I felt really confident like a week ago. They were certainly going to have home court advantage in the first round of the playoffs. Not having home court advantage is disastrous for the Grizzlies. Not having home court advantage, and possibly even if you advance facing the Thunder in the second round, it's disastrous. The Grizzlies have to finish second or third, in my opinion. Like, staying away from the Thunder until possibly the conference finals, that is extremely important for any success you're going to have, for any dreams of advancing. I mean, falling to fourth because you can't take care of business in these important games, losing back-to-back home games, it's a bad look right now. But anyways, enough about that. I think we can compliment Ja on how he's played when healthy. Ja had a great game against the Knicks. Maybe the shooting numbers aren't really there. Of course, he didn't make any of his three-pointers. He hasn't made three-pointers in a long time. But the Knicks game was Ja's fourth straight game, scoring 20 or more. That's the first time this season that he's done that. He has only made 3 of his last 37 three-point attempts, however, which isn't great. And also maybe you could point out, are the Grizzlies better when Ja Morant scores? It's a fair question. Should they be leaning more on Jaren? I don't know. But I felt like eye test said Ja Morant played well in these tough games. Ja Morant is going to have to shoot and score more when you play good teams, and they've been playing good teams. So, despite the bad three-point shooting numbers, 3 for 37. 3 for his last 37 three-point attempts. Ja shooting a career-low 28.7% on threes. He is, however, shooting a career high on free throws. That's a trade-off I think I'm relatively okay with. He's up to 83.5% on free throws because he's 30 for 30 in his last 4 games. I have no idea what the longest free throw streak in Grizzlies franchise history is. I don't know how to look that up. But right now, in his last 4 games, Ja is 30 for 30 from the foul line. Very impressive. Desmond Bane against the Knicks had a really good game. Despite missing all 4 of his three-point attempts, he had 25 points and 12 rebounds. Edey had a double-double in that game, 11 rebounds, including 5 on the offensive glass. He had 10 points. Jalen Wells against the Knicks, only 3 points in his 22 minutes. Jaren had 18 points and 7 rebounds and 2 blocks. Brandon Clark, before leaving with that injury, was 5 for 5 from the field, 11 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists. Aldama was only 1 for 6 on 3-pointers, 9 points, 5 rebounds, and 2 assists. Scottie Pippen played 12 minutes, did not score. Luke Kennard played 24 minutes, had 6 points and 3 assists, did not make a 3-pointer. Oh, and got ejected. Luke Kennard got ejected for throwing the ball against the stanchion. Picked up his second technical foul of the game. Not a great game for Luke Kennard to get ejected when you're this short-handed. He got thrown out with like 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter. This is the second ejection of Luke Kennard's career. He also had one last season on the Grizzlies. 0 ejections for Luke in his career before coming to Memphis. Now he has 2. Meanwhile, Santi Aldama against the Spurs was tremendous. Has a career high in assists with 11. Flirts around with a triple-double or a near triple-double. Has 15 points, 11 assists, 8 rebounds. Santi played 37 minutes. Jalen Wells played nearly 39 minutes. He bounced back from his quiet game against New York with 18 points against the Spurs. Edie, off the bench, 7 for 7 from the field, 17 points, 9 rebounds, including 6 on the offensive board. This was sort of maybe a Rookie of the Year showcase game. I mean, Wells played a nice game. Edie had a really good game. Unfortunately, Stephen Castle had the better game of those 3 guys. Stephen Castle had 24 points and 7 assists. Even looking at the minutes, like going back to the Conchar thing, I mean, Conchar played 16 minutes. Who cares? You look at the overall minutes, like I said, Wells played 39. Aldama played 37. Jaren played 35. Again, 42 points, 15 for 25 from the field, had 2 steals and 2 blocks. Those were your 3, highest minute totals. Fourth in minutes was Zach Edey, who played 26 minutes. Yeah, he came off the bench, but he logged one of his highest minute totals of the season. Luke Kennard played 24 minutes, was 6 out of 9 from the field for 14 points, had 6 rebounds and 5 assists. Like, I think the minutes went to the right guys. The bigger question is, like, maybe why didn't Gigi play more? Why can't Gigi play more? What's going on with him? Is he truly that bad? Aren't we supposed to at least develop him and see what he has there? Cam Spencer only played 5 minutes in the first half. Jay Huff only played 3 minutes in the first half. And then Lamar Stevens, who again got an opportunity, played 16 minutes, had 6 points and 4 rebounds. And with that, I believe we can wrap it up. Thanks, everybody, for listening. And once again, if you want to support this show, get access to the bonus episode I did yesterday and join my listener Slack channel. Join that Grizzlies Slack channel. You can do that at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. Hope y'all have a great Monday. I'll talk to you soon. Go Grizz.